Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It is Thursday morning. It is shaping up to be a hot one. There is not a cloud in the sky here in Northern England. So today we're staying with the Dylan Rounds case, and over the last 24 hours I've absorbed a lot of content. There's a lot of people talking about this. Zav Girl's doing a great job. There's a channel called Monkie Mar who are also doing a great job. Never heard of them before until this case. I'm going to drop links in the description box to Zav Girl's channel and Monkie Mar's channel, so please do check those out. So overnight my time, and I've just had a chance to listen to it, Jim, the PI, has been on Monkie Mar's channel and has played a call from a lady who works for Justin. Justin is Dylan's dad. And I'm pleased that Jim has recorded this call. One of my objections to Jim coming out and talking about Candice, Dylan's mother, and about possibly Dylan being gay and the things that people have said. One of the things I said is, prove it. You can't come out and say these things without having some actual evidence that you've spoken to people. So he's come out and he's played a call. It's a very interesting call. Is it directly relevant to Dylan's disappearance? No, probably not. It's very early days in this investigation, but there's so many people talking already that it's starting to become quite difficult to differentiate fact from opinion, from hearsay, and yeah, we know how that works out, don't we? You know, a year into the Summer Wells case, and how many facts do we actually have? How much information do we have on the internet? Reams and reams and reams and reams of it. But fact, you could write the facts on a postage stamp. I kind of feel that with the Dylan Rounds case, we're seeing that developing already, and that's a concern. However, as long as we keep it straight, you know, what is fact, what is hearsay, what is opinion, what is directly relevant, what could be relevant, and we differentiate between these things, and we're very careful to make sure that these things are differentiated. From my point of view, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it all. So this call was with a lady who works for Justin's company. Justin and his family have a trucking company. So she doesn't see Justin himself very often. He comes into the office, but she gets on with her work. The other workers get on with their work. But she's worked there a long time and she does know a lot of things, right? You know, if you've been working somewhere for several years, of course you get to know a lot of things. Some of it might be rumour, but some of it is true. The things that she talked about in relation to Candice, I'm going to mention it, but I just want to be very clear that I'm not telling you this information because I think Candice has got anything to do with Dylan's disappearance. Jim's talking about this stuff because he wants to discredit Candice because Candice has tried to discredit him. So there's kind of personal animosity there, which we have to note. But allegedly, Candice left the family. This is going back quite a few years. And she didn't have any contact with her kids, so Dylan, his brother and his sister, for at least 3 years. Jim's kind of speculated that maybe Candice feels guilty, and that's why she's trying to kind of control the situation. I don't know whether that's true. I think the fact that she left the family, Justin and her divorced, and things got quite nasty. Yes, it's relevant to the upbringing of those kids. It's perhaps relevant to the way that Dylan feels about certain aspects of his life. He probably holds some pain because of it. But is it directly relevant to his disappearance? No, because we're not saying that Dylan had a mental health crisis. We're not saying this is possibly a similar situation to that of Aidan Clune, who was having a mental health crisis, who disappeared into the desert and hasn't been seen since the 20 odd of April, hasn't been heard from since the 27th of April, I think. We're not saying that. So any pain that Dylan is holding from his childhood, we all have issues, right? I have issues. We all have issues. But it doesn't lead to an acute mental health crisis that results in somebody disappearing into the desert to be never seen of again. There's many reasons why people have mental health crises. So Dylan's childhood, perhaps it is relevant to why he wanted to go and live on his own and be on his own and just concentrate on farming. But we can't turn back the clock and say, well, if this hadn't have happened, then Dylan would have been a very different kid. He would have stayed in high school. He would have gone to college. We don't know that. Dylan might have just wanted to spend his life farming, regardless of whatever else went on in Dylan's life, in his childhood. I've attended to it. I've clocked it. It's stored in my brain now, just in case it becomes relevant as we know more about the case, as we know more about the situation. I don't feel it's directly relevant at this current time, but we never know. At this early stage, you've got to consider everything. Just clock everything. So there was this kind of bad divorce, and Candice has married someone else, but she owes a lot of money. She owes a lot of money. Now, the fact that she owes a lot of money doesn't tell me anything about the disappearance of Dylan. If she owes a lot of money and she went along and stole Dylan's cash, and there was evidence that she was stealing from Dylan, then yeah, well, we've got a motive there. But otherwise, it's not relevant, in my opinion. But what is, I think, very evident is that Candice has controlled the show. Candice has been very negative about law enforcement. She's been out on lots of different channels, media outlets. Her and Justin have done another interview with East Idaho News, which was interesting. I'll leave a link to that in the description box as well. She has been the spokesperson for the family. She's a go-getter. She has actually got things going. I think we have to praise her for that. I think we have to praise her for taking control and getting law enforcement to do things. Having said that, maybe law enforcement have been doing things. Maybe law enforcement were on the case. They're not going to tell the family everything they do. That's just the way investigations work. They keep lots of things very close to their vest. And it's possible, now the FBI are involved, that there are going to be developments in the case, and perhaps this case will be solved sooner than we think. I don't know, that's just my opinion. But there is a channel called Monsters Under Our Bed, I think it's called, who have said that they've seen FBI agents there at the property, kind of taking things out of a shed. So, evidence collection, presumably. There's also talk of some guy called Robert Aviles, who's been arrested out of Wendover on a pre-existing warrant. His warrant is from Nevada, but he's been taken to Box Elder County Sheriff's Office. So is he being questioned about the disappearance of Dylan? This is all speculation and rumour. I don't know how much of this is true. It's just things that have come out on the grapevine. Allegedly, he knows Chase, you know, the guy who Dylan lied to his mother about, that he was kind of the first suspect, if you will. We know about Chase. He's in jail. Allegedly, he's got an alibi, so maybe he's not relevant. But the point is, people are being arrested. People are being taken in. And it's easy to arrest someone when they've got a pre-existing warrant against them. Allegedly, Kurt has been interviewed more than once, allegedly. Now, Kurt's brother Troy has been talked about, and Jim, the private investigator, said that it's Troy who's an RSO. It's Troy who is has been kidnapping women, and there's people who are prepared to come forward, not the women themselves, but people have, talked to Jim about it and have been kind of prepared to come forward via Jim, like anonymously, to say. Well, I looked up Troy's background and looked up the RSO registry in Nevada, in Utah, in Idaho, and Troy Wadsworth isn't there. And I was kind of thinking, well, is he using a pseudonym? Am I getting the name wrong? Now, Zavgirl, I think, has cracked it. In that Kurt and Troy have another brother. Now, she hasn't named him. She doesn't want to be the first person to name him. I don't know his name, so I can't look this up to prove it. But she has found this other brother who is an RSO. So it's possible that Jim, the private investigator, is telling the truth. He's just got the brother's name wrong. He's just got the brother's names confused. So let's be very careful in accusing people of kidnapping women and being an RSO when they're not. When that charge, when that lifestyle is your brother's and not you. So apologies to Troy, because I've said that. I said, oh, Troy, this RSO, and you go back and you look and you think, no, he isn't. No, he isn't. So apologies, Troy, if you ever watch this video. But I think Zavgirl has cracked it in that regard. But is that relevant to the disappearance of Dylan? Is the fact that Kurt's brother is an RSO who kidnaps women, is that relevant to the disappearance of Dylan? Possibly, if Dylan has been kidnapped and tied up somewhere. But what would be the motive for that? If he's having some kind of, as Jim has said, having some kind of relationship with Kurt, why would his brother or anyone else come along and kidnap him and keep him tied up somewhere? What would be the motive for that? So it's got me thinking about motive. I've thought of two possible motives. Now, one of them has got more evidence than the other via this woman who Jim has played the call of on Monkie Mar's channel. The first motive, I thought, is, look, these are small towns. Montello's a small town. There's hardly anyone lives in Lucin. I think a neighbour of Dylan's who lives like 20 odd miles away has also come out and spoke on Monkie Mar's channel. And she lives 20 odd miles away from Dylan, but she's like his neighbour. And she said, she knows he doesn't stay there. He doesn't stay on his farm. He stays elsewhere. Again, this is all hearsay and speculation, but 2 weeks before he disappeared, he wasn't staying at the farm. He was going to the farm to do work, but then staying elsewhere. So was he going to Montello every night? I said in my first or second video on this case that maybe Montello's more important than we think, because there's even talk that the power washing of the truck isn't relevant because Dylan washed his own truck and people around and about in Montello know it. See, there's all of these things that are being talked about. What is fact and what is fiction? I don't know. But it's absolutely possible, as I've said in a previous video, that his mother doesn't know him as well as she thinks. She's put this narrative out that the truck must have been power washed because Dylan never does it himself, but maybe she doesn't know that Dylan occasionally power washes his own truck, and it's absolutely not relevant. So, and the boots, it could be that she doesn't know Dylan as well as she thinks she does, and Dylan actually has 2 pairs of boots, and he's left that pair of boots just hanging around, and he's got another pair of boots. I don't know, maybe he was power washing his truck, his boots got wet and he changed his boot. Who knows, right? Who knows? The point is let's not get hung up, and we've all been hung up a little bit on the boots, but let's not get hung up on that, because it may not be anything at all to do with it. So, motive number one that I've been thinking about is this an anti-gay crime? So it doesn't matter whether Dylan is gay or not. If people in the area who are homophobic perceive him as gay, and there's talk that he is, even if he isn't, somebody could well take offence at that, commit an anti-gay crime, and have left him somewhere. Either killed him or left him to die somewhere. I know it sounds horrible, but it drew me back to a case from 1998 that I know very well. 6th of October 1998, Matthew Shepherd, who was a student at the University of Wyoming, was in a bar. He got approached by two young men. They claimed that he made a pass at one of them. He was gay. He made a pass at one of them, and he reacted and overreacted. They said that they originally planned to rob Matthew, but things got out of hand. But they tortured him. They took him into the desert, tied him to a fence, and left him there. And he was there in a coma for 18 hours until, I think it was a cyclist or someone passing by saw him. I actually thought it was a scarecrow, like that a farmer had tied to a fence. And he died 6 days later in hospital. So this was a murder trial. The two guys were arrested very quickly. A horrible, horrible situation. And I was thinking, is this very similar? Is this going to turn out to be another Matthew Shepherd? And is Dylan's perceived, doesn't have to be his actual, but perceived sexuality relevant to this? But that's on the table, right? That's on the table. However, this woman who was speaking to Jim, who works for Justin, said something very interesting, and I have heard this on the grapevine. So yeah, I've heard this from other people, probably who've heard it from Jim. So, you know, again, take it with a grain of salt. This is hearsay. But Dylan had a lot of money. People around that area allegedly deal in cash because it's so difficult to get to a bank, and it's just easier to deal in cash. And he'd been paid for a job he did for somebody, and he'd also been given a loan by his grandfather. So his grandfather could confirm or deny this, I guess. I'm sure if it's true, the police know all about it. And he had up to $80,000. Now, maybe he spent some of it if this was a loan for the farm to buy equipment and stuff. Well, then maybe he spent some of it. But the fact remains that Dylan was dealing in cash, and he was talking about it. He was bragging about it in the Saddle Sore bar. So, had somebody decided to rob Dylan? Like, follow Dylan back to the farm? Maybe? Like, if Dylan's been staying in Montello, and then he's been bragging about having this cash, thousands of dollars. You know, he spoke to his grandma in the early morning hours, like 10 to 7 in the morning on the 28th of May, and he said to his grandma that he's got to go and sort out his grain. Well, we don't know at that point whether he was in Montello or whether he was on the farm, but he presumably went back to the farm because his phone was pinged in that vicinity at 3:40 in the afternoon, so at least his phone was there. What if, at some point in that day, somebody who'd heard Dylan bragging went to the farm to rob him? Initially planned to rob him, but then things went wrong, things got out of hand, and Dylan sadly ended up dying. Isn't that something that could really have happened? Now, who that could have been is an open question. Could that have been somebody just some guy in a saddle sore box. But the neighbour, who lived like 20 odd miles away from Dylan, but he was his close neighbour, said that there's so few people out there. There's only a handful of cell phones. It should be easy to track a cell phone that isn't usually in that area. But if you're going to go and rob somebody, maybe you had the common sense to turn your cell phone off. Can you still track a cell phone if it's off? I'm not sure. It's very sad. But I think we are going to see a resolution in this case. I think, perhaps the police are doing more behind the scenes than we know about. The fact that the FBI is involved is obviously a very good thing. So we'll just have to see. And I'm following this case closely. I'm following all the developments closely. So, yeah, I'll leave it there for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. I've been Michelle. Hope you're well. I'll see you in the next video. It's goodbye from Miss Tillington, who's hot, and Miss Cassie Springer. Gonna go in. It's getting pretty hot now. Hot for me, not hot for some of you guys. Okay, bye for now.